First things first, I want to say, thank you to those of you that did give us feedback last week during our feedback session. We do want to try and incorporate more writing into the sessions. And so we're going to try to actually dedicate a few minutes towards the very end to getting you started on doing some writing. And then also next week, we're going to do another workshopping session. So we'll be kind of alternating. Next week, everybody will have a chance to share whatever they come up with. We're also going to experiment next week with doing breakout rooms to see if that helps everybody to share with their compañeros in the class. But for today, especially anybody that comes in a little bit late, you guys will be able to watch the recording, at least, the early part of it if you miss anything. But from now on, we're going to try to get started closer to 6:30 than we typically get started. So let's go ahead and get going. Because I do want to, like I said, try and give us some time to actually practice a little bit of writing before we close out the session. And today, our quote of the day comes from Chris Bojalian, who is a contemporary writer. He is currently writing and has, I think, if I remember correctly, somewhere between 20 and 30 novels that he's actually published. So he's pretty prolific, yeah. As you can see here, born on the 12th of August in 1962, and he's an Armenian-American novelist. And he is quoted as saying, "Food is a gift and should be treated reverentially, romanced and ritualized and seasoned with memory." Y aquí en español se los traducí para decir, la comida es un regalo y se debe tratar con reverencia, cortejada y ritualizada y sazonada con memoria. It just goes to show how each one of us can interpret things our own way and see things, either from a macro point of view or from a micro point of view. It comes down to our individual experience. And I think that's kind of what our quote is sort of getting at too. Maybe. I mean, he does say, right, food should be treated as a gift, right? Because it is a gift. And with that, I think the gift part of it is maybe in reference to the idea of romancing, ritualizing, and seasoning it with memory. Right? That's I think, a key component to this. But, I'll leave that to discussion to you. What do you think, right? What does he mean by seasoning it with memory? I think that's a great point, and it actually reminded me right now of, I think it was 2 weekends ago, not this last weekend that just passed, but the one before. I went and I got my flu shot, and I went to a Rite Aid, and, there was like a special promotion going on where if you got the flu shot, you would also get a free scoop of Thrifty's ice cream. And for me, Thrifty's ice cream specifically has a unique memory that is actually associated with vaccinations. When I was little, I got tuberculosis, and so I had to go to the clinic every month for a long time because it was a really long recovery for me. I almost died from TB. And my mom is kind of like a compensation for me doing well at the clinic, with the syringes and getting my shots. She would take me sometimes, if she had the money, she would take me to get a scoop of Thrifty's ice cream because it was right across the parking lot. So, that particular memory associated with that particular ice cream, and done in that way, right? After getting my vaccine or getting my shot, to then go get ice cream, it became a ritual, right? And it became something that, for me, eventually did lead to me now having this sort of love for Thrifty's ice cream that is very specific to me, So in a way that, what Chris Bojalian is saying in this quote, for me, it resonates in that way when I think about that particular food. Like Abraham just said in the chat, food is life, or like what Vero observed. Food is also the way to the heart, how one can also transcend barriers, such as language. Um, I think that's a great observation to have about food. Um, and I think the ritual of food. Sometimes we don't realize that it is a ritual that we're participating in when it comes to food and the way that we consume food. Um, and all of the things that go around with it, right? To sort of clarify, what ritual is, when we talk about ritual or when we ritualize something. I did look up the actual, definition of what ritual, and we have three different ways of understanding ritual, or sorry, two, but the second one, as you can see, it has its own variations. The first definition is the established form for a ceremony. The order of words prescribed for a religious ceremony specifically. So, here it's like a chant, a prayer, that's a form of ritual. Or like if you think about the order in which things are supposed to be done when, like, say, taking sacrament, in church, in a Catholic church specifically, or the way that like a pastor might lead their prayer, or even the way that I conduct our workshops. There's a form of ritual there. You also have ritual observance. The second form of the definition is ritual observance, or a system of rites. So this is the order in which things are conducted. A ritual is also a ceremonial act or action, or like what Abraham is talking about when it comes to the forging of a samurai sword in ancient Japan, and even in contemporary Japan, for a master swordsman. Right? It's an act or series of acts regularly repeated in a set, precise manner. So, when you think about even like us making breakfast, for example, part of my morning ritual is to, get the coffee beans. I weigh the coffee beans. Then I add a small amount of water to the grinder to, make sure that the coffee beans grind perfectly. I take my water, I boil the water, then I prepare and, clean the filter, right? So there is a ritual there that I practice when it comes to making coffee. But when you really stop to reflect, right, you realize that, well, yeah, this is a form of ritual. It's something that you do on a regular basis, with precision, or maybe with a little bit less precision than you might conduct, like, yeah, than me. Yeah, I take it. Yeah, I've been taking it to an extreme, but that's part of the process, right? Like it's a process of conducting something that has a significance for you. Yeah, and like what Vero is saying in the chat, in regards to food and the way that we might prepare it, right? The care that you put into it might be a reflection of, how special the meal might be, right? If you put a lot of care into making dinner, on, like, say, Thanksgiving, that means that it's important to you, that particular meal, that environment, the people that are going to be a part of it. Your the effort that you're putting in might be a reflection of how much you care about them, right? Um, yeah, Vero, sounds like your mom is a lot like me. I don't like to cook in a dirty kitchen either. And I will wash things before I get into my ritual. Ritual, right? We all have our own rituals and our ways of enacting them. And when it comes to food in itself can be a ritual, right? The creation of it, the delivery of it, even the way that we might actually consume it. Some people will say a prayer before partaking in a meal. So, there's definitely ritual in a lot of things that we do that we don't sometimes realize. Yeah, like Mauricio said in the chat, It's a way to maybe honor your family's traditions, and picking out the ingredients that go into a particular food or not. Even that can be part of a ritual. So as we think about how we ritualize food and how we, use food as a way to sort of relive memories, or even just simply how we make memories. Let's talk a little bit about how we write that down, right? Now, one of the conversations that came up recently, I think it was actually last week when we were talking about verb tenses in one person's writing in particular. There's something that is really important for us to consider when we're writing poetry. When we're writing in general, but I would say when we're writing poetry and stories, because I have been teaching a workshop series on writing creative nonfiction recently. This is something that I also taught there. But I think it's good for us to sort of reinforce this. A lot of you already practice writing on a regular basis, so you probably don't realize that you do these things subconsciously, but it's kind of good to just be reminded, a little refresher. And when we're talking about verb tense, we're talking about the actions, the way in which we're conveying a message. Because verbs are what engage people more than anything else, in my opinion, when we're talking about writing poetry specifically, right? We're affecting with the verb choice and the tense of the verb, right? We're affecting things like time, our perception of time. Past, present, and future are the three states of time, right? They're the three states of being. You would say I was, or I am, or I will be, right? When we're talking about our first person state of being. And then, the conjugations follow, right? For second, third person, and all of that. Storytelling almost always happens in past or present tense, right? We can't really tell a story of something that will happen. So when we're thinking about future tense, we're usually thinking about, reflection, reflective thoughts. And when you're writing in present tense, or if you're writing in past tense, you're going to either have your audience understand that it's something that you're conveying in either a reflective way or in a way that's passive, basically, which brings us to the second one, right? Mood. Mood in writing basically is another way of talking about either active or passive voice. Most people, I think, will respond more strongly to active voice, right? To an active mood, to a sense of urgency or agency. Passive voice, to speak in a passive voice, is almost always going to be written in past tense. So I was working, I worked, all of the past tense conjugations are going to have a more passive sense to them, right? That might be something you want to achieve in your writing if you're, looking to slow things down, or if you're looking to create, again, that sense of reflection, which is something that future tense does, which when you look at future tense, it's kind of like a way of writing in past form with an active verb. So, there's something there's like a nuance there to writing in the future sense, but active voice is usually done in present tense. And it's very imagistic, right? To write in an active voice is going to create a sense of agency, like I said, but beyond just the sense of agency, it's also going to create an image, a much stronger image in poetry especially. So when you're writing poetry, my recommendation is to try and be as active as you can be, especially when you're describing any kind of action, such as a ritual. And that's something that we'll get to see in a little bit. And of course, there's point of view, right? Your verb tense is always going to change based on point of view. Uh, and so here, I don't feel like I need to go through this all that much. But you have first person singular, first person plural. Some of these things do change in Spanish because in Spanish we have other ways of describing third person. But second person, so the you, right, when you're talking directly to your reader, you, singular and plural go together. Then you have third person singular and third person plural, which is the they, right? They, a group that's plural. Um, the narrator's voice will always tell us who the point of view is, right? And it's really, really important that your verb tense be consistent. So in sometimes when I've provided feedback to you guys, I might indicate, your verb tense shifted here a little bit. It might make the writing feel a little bit disjointed, or it might make it feel passive when you really wanted it to be active. Or, sometimes it can confuse a reader when verb tense shifts, and especially when it goes back and forth a lot without any obvious reason. There are times where verb tense will be necessary to, change it, right? Like if a person is triggered by a present moment to then reflect on the past, or they might be using future tense to sort of show that things are wrapping up, and they're looking forward now to whatever comes next. So those changes in verb tense, they will happen because grammar requires them to happen. But as much as possible, when you're writing poetry, my recommendation is to really think in an active sense, right? Think in active terms and try and stay in the present tense when you're writing. Yeah, storytelling in prose form a lot of times does happen in the past tense. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen in the present tense either. You know, like a horror novel, for example, or maybe not a novel, but like a short story, it might work better to actually do it in present tense, because it feels more like it induces anxiety a little bit more. If you're trying to write, like, say, a thriller or something on the mystery side, present tense can really generate that mood that you're looking for. So it does depend a little bit on how long something might be, and also just the overall mood that you're going for. So do keep that in mind. Novels can be written in present tense. As I Lay Dying is a good example of that. Now, also another thing that I should probably say is that when it comes to grammar and poetry, there's no absolutes. You can break these rules all you want, but the most important thing to really think about is effectiveness, right? Is your writing being effective in, translating or transmitting the image that you want to show us? Is it, giving us the emotional connection that we want? Uh, all of those things are measures of effectiveness. So, you could take these things that we're going over in terms of verb tense right now, and you can play with them if you feel like it's going to benefit your poem. But today, we're going to look at a poem that comes from Minnie Bruce Pratt. Uh, as you can see here, they're also a contemporary poet here from the US. She is a poet and essayist, and has won a lot of awards, mostly in the LGBTQ writing areas. But this particular poem, it's called Breakfast, and I think that this one really stood out to me, especially when we think about the ritual of breakfast. I mean, yeah, you do probably get that sense of a little bit of chaos, right? Rush hour. Mm. Yeah. Ani, yeah. Ani wrote, feels like I'm right there with her, very immediate and clear. You do get a strong sense of image for sure. Yeah, yeah. Not the restaurant, but yeah, it is like, pick up and go, right? Um, Queda o ir. There's, either stay or go. Uh, and no one stays for long. So you do get that for sure. Obviously, poetry is meant to be read out loud, right? Poetry has this quality to it where when it's spoken, when it's not something that you're actively reading on paper, more often than not, you're able to visualize it better in your mind's eye, right? Um, and there's definitely a clarity to this poem that I think is partly because of how active it is. Abraham in the chat wrote, it definitely depicts a busy, almost chaotic atmosphere, but all people there with different lives still connected because of food. Food, in this case, breakfast, right? It becomes sort of like the theme that unifies everybody. But it's not just the food, it's the ritual of it, right? The ritual of standing there. The line, let me see if I can pull it up for you guys. Here, this particular set of lines. We stand until someone says yes. The next person behind breathes hungrily. The cashier's hands never stop. He shouts, "Where's my double double?" We help. We eliminate all verbs. There's like an unspoken understanding of what happens, right? We stand until someone says yes. And then, there's the observation. The cashier's hands never stop. He shouts, "Where's my double double?" So there's the understanding that the cashier is very busy and has no time to stop. And so what do all of the people do? Right? It's not just the I help, right? It's not the speaker of the poem that says I help, I eliminate verbs. It's we help, right? It becomes now an understanding. It becomes ritualized where everyone knows to eliminate all verbs. The superfluous, meaning the extra, the unnecessary, want, need, give, they don't have to be spoken because the cashier already knows. They already know. Right? So here you have sort of like this unspoken rule. Right? You have a strong sense of understanding among everyone, including us, the readers, right? Because we're part of the we. We understand. There's no need to say I want or give me. I need. We're just there to eat. We're there to order. It's an effective poem, I would say. The ritual is the getting of the food, says Abraham. Yeah. It's like an assembly line. Yeah. San Juanita wrote in the chat. It's like assembly line work. Yeah. It's sort of like this mechanized or assembly line process. People wait in line. They know to wait in line. They don't approach the cashier until the cashier says yes, indicating that they're ready. An efficient way of talking, as Abraham is saying. We get that sense of efficiency. Yeah, Ani is observing too in the chat, right? Food trucks and fast food joints. A lot of them work that way. Yeah, it's like the boom, 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 in, out, let's go. And when you think about it, looking back, let's actually go back to our definition of ritual. What is a ritual? Ritual, an act or series of acts regularly repeated in a set, precise manner. Abraham, I think you're right. Abraham says that it reminds him of a New York deli on TV. and the soup Nazi, as Ani says from Seinfeld, right? Yeah, I'm not sure, right? I'm not 100% sure if this poem was written in New York, inspired by, a deli or a sandwich shop in New York, but it sounds like it. It feels like it. But we have something similar to that here too. There's the taco stands. The taquero probably moves with the same sort of efficiency. Um, for sure, if you go to a place like Chipotle or Subway, where they prepare the food right in front of you, and you're just kind of going down the line, that's also probably another good example of that kind of circumstance. Um, pick a number, what you want, move along. Yeah, exactly. And San Juanita says that she found the best taco stand. You're gonna have to share that one. Uh, we're gonna have to go make a bola. It's not that uncommon, right? To especially if you're from another community, like uh, like you, San Juanita. For me, there's really no burrito place like the burrito places in San Diego. You know? It took me a really, really long time to find a place that I really liked here in LA. That was, quality wise, that lived up to my standards. But well, what I was gonna say though is that part of the reason for that is because of what our quote that we started off with. At least this is how I tie it in. It comes down to our connection with the food, the way that we ritualize it, the way that it's seasoned with memory, you know. Yeah. I mean, for me, the very first place that I discovered in LA when I moved here that really reminded me of home was Cacao Mexicatessen in Eagle Rock. And at the time, I was living in the valley. I was living in Panorama City, and I made the trip to Eagle Rock at least once a week, when I first discovered it, because I was like, man, this tastes just like home. Um, and I mean, San Juanita, 14 years is a long time to go without, having a taco shop or a place that you can get your tacos that remind you of, I'm assuming, Texas, right? Um, yeah, it's partly because it's tied to memory. The way that we season our food is with memory, or I should say, our memory is seasoned with food. It's probably the other way around. And maybe it's because part of the ritual has been lost. Um, like Mauricio was saying, earlier when we were talking about the quote. Maybe part of the ritual is a way to preserve our traditions. Um, there's definitely a lot to be said about our connection with food and the way in which we engage in food. Um, but to now sort of bring it back to the poem, right? The poem itself shows at least the consumption of food, the way we order it, the way that a person might just stand there and eat their sandwich before heading off to work. Um, it shows us that there is a sort of unconscious ritualization that we have with food. It's always associated with food. And the way that the writer wrote this poem, all of you, I think, got that same sense that I got. It's active, it's immediate, and it's very clear. More than anything, it's very, very clear. This could have been about a taquero, right, and his taco stand and people ordering a plate of tacos. It could have been about a person going to, I don't know, a bar even, and ordering a drink at a bar, right? Like all of these things, were presented to us in a way that made us feel like we were there and that we were a part of the ritual. And part of it has to do with the point of view. Part of it has to do with the pace, and the sense of time. And all of it has everything to do with verb tense. The entire poem is written in present tense. So, what did you write there? But if you think about it, it also speaks of a time frame. Yeah, So it speaks about, right, that moment in the morning, rush hour, as people try to get breakfast. It's the busiest hour of the day. Now, what I'd like you all to do is, and because this particular poem is about breakfast and this person's ritual surrounding breakfast, what I'd like you all to do right now is, if you have pen and paper or pencil and paper nearby, or even if you want to do this in the chat, think about your breakfast routine. Whatever time of day that you have breakfast. I have breakfast, technically, my breakfast is at like 4, sometimes 5 p.m. When I actually break my fast. My coffee routine would probably be what I would write about. But think about your routine surrounding the first thing that you consume in the day, and try to describe that in present tense. Try to live in that moment, and write just a couple of little notes. And like I said, if you want to use the chat now to at least give us a little sneak peek into your routine, your ritual surrounding the first thing that you consume in the day. I'll give y'all like 5, let's go 5 minutes. Just keywords right now. Make a list, write down a couple of phrases, things that you might use to describe for us your breakfast routine. See some good stuff happening in the chat there. Thank you so much, Abraham, for sharing that. I'll give you all another, let's say 2 minutes. Yeah, definitely make sure if you are using the chat as your space to write that you copy and paste somewhere else. You don't want to lose that. I like that, Abraham. Leftovers. Yesterday's loss, today's win. And like I said, those of you writing in the chat some of your phrases, make sure that you copy and paste these. These are turning out pretty good. Chopping board mantra. I want a quesadilla now. Yeah, I could go for one too. For this week, your writing prompt is kind of, as you probably already guessed, to write the ritual of your breakfast routine. Now, like I said, breakfast might mean, in the afternoon, the first thing that you consume. It might be in the morning. It depends, obviously, on your eating patterns and your habits. But really, this should be, the ritual of the first thing you consume in the day. But try to actually engage us in the process of doing it. So think about what we talked about with your verb tenses. Try to be active. Use active voice in this. That's going to be, I think, key. And I'll kind of flesh that out a little bit more in the writing prompt that gets posted on Google Classroom. But again, for this week, write the ritual of the first thing you consume in a day. And next week, what we're going to do is we're going to have another workshopping session. So, for those of you that got started today, great. Hopefully you'll have something to share with the group next week. And next week, we're going to try and experiment with the breakout rooms to see if, that's a thing that actually works for everybody. San Juanita, thank you for actually bringing that up in the chat. If that's part of your ritual, right? Like checking your blood sugar and taking medications. If that's something that is an important part, do definitely write about that. Think about what you just said, right? Like that's maybe a good way to sort of show the gratification of the ritual, right? So yeah, definitely keep it real. Yeah, if that's a part of your routine, then include that, because it is the whole ritual that we're trying to express. And like I said, one of the things that I would really like to see, if you feel comfortable doing it this way, is to really try to do it in active voice, right? Use present tense throughout the whole poem, to keep us engaged and manipulate the the sense of time and mood that we get. All right, so if there's no more questions, no more comments, que disfruten de su cafecito. I hope y'all have a good night. Yeah, take care, y'all. Have a good one. We'll see you next week. Next Tuesday.